Welcome back. It's Friday, so it's time for another Fast Fun Friday technique. Today I'm going to try a totally experimental and new background technique in this altered book journal that I just started. So let's get going. I'm going to try starting with these chalk pastels, or just a soft pastel chalk, and I'm putting down a pastel ground on this 2-page spread. I've already done the one on the left, and I'm just applying it here to the page on the right. Actually, it's the left-hand page, but the book is upside down. So just putting a thin layer. I have never worked with this before, so I thought it would be fun to just kind of bring you along and experiment a little bit and see what happens by using those chalk pastels and then adding some water. So I'm just putting the ground down first. What that does is it helps the chalk adhere better so that so much of it doesn't fall off the page. Sorry, that was my phone. So that's where I'm starting. It gives a real gritty feel to the surface, so that is so that the chalk will grab onto that. And I do find that later on it really worked to my advantage. So here I'm just drying it off and getting ready to add the chalk. Okay, it's all dry. So I just stuck some pieces of deli paper between my pages so that I don't make a huge mess all over everything else. And I'm just randomly taking a couple of greens, and then I'll grab a yellow and a white. And my goal is just to kind of get color all over these pages. And then my plan was to lay down all of this pastel and then spray it with water and see if it moves and see if it's a good alternative to using acrylic paint, mainly because I've had these pastels forever and I never use them. They've just been sitting in my drawer. They're old, and I thought, well, let's experiment with them and see what we can make them do. Might not be what they were designed to do, but you know, always experimenting and going outside the box a bit to see what will happen. That's kind of one of my favorite things to say to myself when I'm in the studio. Well, if I do this, I wonder what would happen. Sometimes what happens is good and sometimes it's not so good, but you don't know till you try, right? So I thought I would just bring you along and we could see what happens together. So I've added a couple of greens and yellow, and thought about black, but then I'm thinking, no, if I'm going to wet this, it's probably going to make too much of mud. So just went in with some white. Thought what's the worst that could happen is it'll just lighten the colors a little bit. So then I have this fine mist spray bottle, and I just put an even spray of water across the page, and then I took this bowl scraper that I use for cold wax painting, and I'm just seeing if the chalk will move, and it does, but it kind of just mushes together into that green color that you see in that puddle there. And the puddle was kind of maybe the consistency of a syrup. I tried to get it to drip, but it really didn't. It was kind of thick and didn't really want to move. So not so pretty at this stage, but I have a different plan for the other page to see if we can get better results. So I'm going to spray that page with water any minute now. Oh, I forgot. I brought this paper towel in just to kind of soak up the excess water on that page and to see really how much chalk actually came off. And if you caught a glimpse of that paper towel, you see not very much came off. So the pastel ground really did hold the chalk even when it was wet. On this side, after I sprayed it with water, I went in with this kind of semi-stiff brush, and I liked using that a lot better than the bowl scraper. I felt like I had more control of where the color went and how much it mixed with the other colors. So that worked out better. It was also a much smoother application. Only problem I had was the brush was constantly losing bristles, so I had to pick those out, but at least I know that a brush like that, maybe a different one, works better than the bowl scraper. You can see the comparison of one page to the other. I just got a much smoother color in the background, so then I decided I would just go over the other page, try to smooth it out a little bit and get rid of some of those hard lines. So now I'm feeling a little more encouraged about this, that it just might work. And I'm just going back in and going to blot each side again. I kind of sort of dry it off, but also I keep wanting to see how much of that chalk is going to lift, or if that pastel ground is really going to hold it, and it held a lot of it really well. So I'm encouraged at this stage. So obviously that wasn't enough coverage. So while the pages were still damp, I didn't dry them with my heat gun or anything. I thought, well, I'll just see how another layer of chalk goes down, even though the page is still kind of wet, and see if I can't cover up some of the things that I don't want to see. So I went back over that red a little bit, and some of the text was red, so I went over that. And then the pictures I really didn't want to have poking through. They're photographs of tools and things that you use for refinishing furniture, which is what this book originally was about. So I'm just basically covering both pages with another layer of that lighter green. And the ground, when I turned it on its side, when I turned the chalk on its side, that ground really did grab a lot of that chalk. And then I went just back in and made some marks with the yellow. Just some random marks. I thought maybe I would spray it with water again, but I decided to just leave the marks as they were and see what happened, if they ended up being visible at all or not. Next, I thought, okay, chalk is pretty dry, so what would happen if I tried to mix some gesso in with the chalk? And this is just plain white liquid gesso. And I really ended up liking the results. In some places where I, like here, when I first started, I was putting it on with the moderate pressure on the brush, and you can see it mixed with the chalk, which is kind of what I expected it to do. And I've got this really pale, almost celadon green, and then when I used a drier brush in a lighter application, it kept more of the white color. Now as it sat, it did absorb some of the chalk and kind of changed colors, but I like it a lot. I think it really worked well for this application. It was really easy to do, and I think this is one of the advantages maybe of using the pastel over an acrylic, is that once the acrylic's dry, it's not going to mix with the gesso, whereas in the case of the pastel, even though it's dry on the page, it's still a powder, so it did mix once the gesso hit it. So chalk up one advantage to pastel over acrylics for this particular type of application. And I grabbed a baby wipe here, and I thought I want to kind of reveal some of what was underneath the gesso, kind of give it more of an uneven look, and let some of that book page poke through a little bit more. I really wanted to see more of the text than what I had at this stage, so I'm just kind of softening the whole thing and Just bringing some of that history back to the top. I wanted a little bit of that red to show. So that's what I'm doing here, both sides. So I dried everything off really well after I finished with the baby wipe, and then I picked just a few pieces of the Tim Holtz postal tissue paper and a couple of pieces of some mulberry paper, and I just have them laid out there where I want to put those. I need to start bringing some interest and texture into this background, so I'm just going to put those all down with some fluid matte medium here. Okay, all dry. So here's a better look at what we've got so far. You can see the text coming through, the different colors of green, and then the kind of veil of gesso on there. So I'm really liking this so far. So I need some contrast. I'm going with turquoise phthalo in a golden high fluid acrylic, and I'm just going to get some drips going. And I'm having a little bit of trouble because this is the first page spread in this book, and so I'm having to lift the pages up a little bit so I don't slop it all over the cover or the flyleaf page. I'm going to do something in the front there later on, so I need to stand it up and divide it off a little bit with my finger. But adding a lot of water to the fluid medium or the fluid acrylic to get that drip effect going. And I'm loving this color combination of the brighter green with that phthalo turquoise. Really pretty. One of my favorite combos. And then going to the other side and basically just doing the same thing. Get some drips going. I think the drips add the kind of a vintagey feel and just gives a nice texture to the page. Good way to add some contrasting color without really having to add big areas of that color. So there it is. I did want to push those papers back a little bit more, so I just took some more of that really watery acrylic and I'm putting a little on the paper and then dabbing it back with the paper towel. And the really cool thing I found here was that absorbent ground is still grabbing even the acrylic, and I'm getting a really kind of a cool mottled stain effect. So I just keep going and adding color here and there to try to get some stains all over this page and on the papers. So that's basically it. That's my background. I really like it. I like doing this technique with the pastels. I like the way the Pastel Ground reacted and created something new. So maybe give it a try, see if you like it, and let me know in the comments if you did. In a couple of days, come back and see how I finished off this 2-page spread in this altered book. This is my background, but there's more to come. So check it out. And in the meantime, go make some art. Bye.